Hi, I'm Adrian Strittmatter. Welcome to Bricks and More. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SAENTYS, a global creative consultancy specializing in destinations, real estate, and the hospitality sector. Bricks and More is all about exploring how to generate, unlock, and maximize real estate value. Our mission is to challenge outdated and limiting notions of how this is done. In each episode, we talk to top professionals to uncover innovative strategies that drive short, medium, and long-term gains. So if you're passionate about making real estate more valuable for more people, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bricks and More.
In this episode of Bricks and More, we're exploring how design, brand, and experience come together to create destinations that connect with their audiences, their emotional levers, and aspirations. Because in today's world, guests and residents don't just stay or live somewhere. They make these destinations an intricate part of their lives and personalities. So how do we build these places that go beyond beauty and lifestyle? Places that people genuinely love and that owners and investors can depend on for lasting value. To help answer all these questions, I'm joined by Mark Eacott, Global Vice President of Design at Ennismore, the global collective of lifestyle brands where design, culture, and hospitality meet. Mark brings deep experience leading design for some of the world's most innovative, lifestyle-driven destinations. His approach goes far beyond simple aesthetics because he creates spaces that connect with people, express brand purpose, and drive long-term value through materiality, storytelling, and innovation. At Ennismore, Mark oversees design across multiple brands, shaping how places look, feel, and perform, and how they leave a long, lasting, emotional, and commercial impact in the cities and places that they come up in. So Mark, let's dive straight in. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to our Dubai special.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, wonderful to be here.
It's such a great, honor to have you here to talk about everything Ennismore and everything design. So as VP of Design at Ennismore, how do you see, jumping in maybe at the deep end a little bit, how do you see design in the world of real estate as a strategic lever for value? Yeah.
Look, and a good question, I think, and it's good to also talk about a little bit how I got here and how I saw that all come together a little bit. This all started for me back in London in around 2012. I was actually working with you. Everyone knows you, one of the largest non-hospitality players in branded resi. And this was a chance for me to bring in all of my training in design, interiors, architecture, working with big names, Philip Stark and Kelly Hopper and Marcel Wonders, and seeing how that could work in the real estate space, playing on not just design, but brand and marketing. And for me, it was a really good sort of melting pot of how you could play in all of those levers. And leveraging on the name of the designer. Okay, they weren't providing a service, they were providing that name, that design. And also just incredible quality of design through the public areas, through the residents as well. And for me, this really was an eye-opener into that world and this opportunity that they'd really, as one of pioneers in this design-focused branded residential, opened it up. And here we are, many years later, and now we're sort of a competitor and things like this, but it's great. We're all friends and we're doing the same sort of thing, design-focused, us now with more services, F&B, and doing what we do in the lifestyle space. But all of that, and I think what's caught up along that way, and we'll answer other questions as well, is how the market's caught up. Before it was brand junkies, people liking the names, people saw the value in this and how it added the premium. And now people just want, residences, branded residences, design residences that can be a bit more of an expression of their own personality. And what we offer in Ennismore in the lifestyle branded resi space is just that. And I hope I answered your question somehow, but I think that's what we're saying, how it unlocks the levers there. And we'll expand a little bit more on that.
So interesting, something you just said, to go slightly off piece right at the beginning, as we do. How do you feel there's a difference between a brand that's carried by a designer or a person, you mentioned Stark and others, versus a brand that's carried by an organization or a company? Do you think it's easier for people to relate to something that's a brand that's more of a company or someone that's directly linked to a specific designer? I'm just thinking also of certain people who've entered the branded resi space under a name or under a person.
Yeah, and you're talking design right now, and then we're talking a bit more about that. But look, I think there's risk, of course, single name, single entity, whatever happens, career, reputation, and that's got to, have a continued legacy throughout of that. And it can be much harder when you're looking at a brand or an organization or philosophy. I think it's a little bit lower risk. So I'd say risk comes into it. And then I think this obviously leads us to open the question of design or design organization, and then hospitality brand versus non-hospitality brand. And I think it's a great place to be in Dubai to talk about this, where you have car and watch brands and fashion brands, for example, versus people that are renowned for their hospitality. Well. And we're always asking, look, what are people buying into branded resi for? What are they paying their premiums for? It's not just about design. Is it about the experiences we offer? Is it you come to Ennismore to access something cool? You can really connect into a community or a members club or an F&B you can't always have access to, which we can unlock. Or is it just you want that renowned level of hospitality that you would get in one of our hotels or F&B? If you go on the other side, you're going really as a passion for a brand. You really understand brands, you want the legacy, you want that premium, and you're a little bit less worried about that sort of hospitality being served. I think for me, it's a very personal thing, whether you'd buy one or the other.
And in terms of more of a personal question as well, is that how would you say that sort of having worked across multiple markets and multiple brands, how has that helped, shape your sort of design philosophy or what drives you? Yeah,
and look, it's a good question. I've been very lucky and worked in Asia Pacific, here in the Middle East, Europe, and in the Americas, in Los Angeles, where the brands sort of came when we're talking about some of the Ennismore brands here. And I think not only the way of doing business, all those cultural nuances, there's a bit of, fencing. You have to
fine-tuning.
You land in Bangkok, you have to put that hat on and work out how to culturally go to a meeting there versus in Americas, or elbows on the table in Middle East, this kind of power play. So look, all of those business nuances. But I think it's been a great circle of, learning and feeding it back into the next project. And what we're constantly doing is just overseeing design globally for Ennismore, is learning from different markets, pulling in plays over there that have done well. Can it work here, and vice versa? And also designers, we can constantly play that out. And so it's about stepping back. I think it's about, pulling in the good and learning lessons from the bad, and just improving the product. Ennismore, we sweat the details. We're constantly trying to improve the product. We're constantly innovating and pushing the brands. We would never go into a standalone branded resi tower, take one of our brands in, and here we are, 3 or 4 years into this game, doing really well, taking more and more of our brands into standalone branded residential, because the brands can adapt, and because we can innovate them and evolve them to meet this world. And that's the beauty of, I think, every day is a different day and a new challenge, and not just stopping at residential, but living and branded offices and keep going. So the product keeps evolving, which is what gets me up every morning.
Just to remind our audiences, which are the brands that sit specifically under Ennismore?
Yeah, look, some of them, and we have 17 brands. Let's talk about some of the ones that are in the branded residential space. Obviously, Faina, Delano, SLS, Mondrian, and all of those have got products right now in the market. Mama Shelter, we've done some great projects with you here. Hyde. So now we're seeing some of our amazing brands play in the premium space. Not just talking about luxury, and that's doing fantastically well. Looking at families, but mid-scale, but really, really well there. And now we'll be taking some more brands with Hoxton and So even more into branded resi. So if it works, we'll push it forward. And those are throughout the sort of 7 or 8 we're moving in right now, and maybe more to come. Even Habitas and things like this would be great to see Habitas as a branded residential, or our Habitas brand.
What I find really interesting is that innovating the product as a destination, as you said, like starting to add other asset classes into it, whether it's offices or whether it's anything that's linked to life, and so on and so forth. You were talking really interesting also about the sort of the cultural or business nuances. In terms of the brands that you mentioned, do you feel that some brands like resonate better in some markets, some just don't manage, you can't get a grasp of them, because sometimes obviously, and we've worked together on, you know, some really excellent projects, you see a brand in the market and you're like, okay, well, it's less known. You don't really know what journey it's going to be able to have in that market.
But also there's nice surprises. Mondrian in Gold Coast, you know, inaugural launch for the brand before we even had a hotel there. We're launching residential in Australia. And it was a phenomenal success, sold out in a matter of months at high premiums. And something like 90% of the buyers had all been or known or stepped into Mondrian in Los Angeles. And so this is a really warming kind of, always surprising us, the power of our own brands. And 99% were domestic buyers and things like this. So I think we're always learning about how the brands are known and renowned. And then Faino launching in Interior Gate last week as well. Phenomenal pickup as well, SLS in Red Sea, just in this sort of region. But I think, yeah, you're right. I think it's about trying to work out which is going to resonate. You know, some of our brands are more intellectual, some are very eye candy, very showy in that way, and why not? And that's great. And then some are super playful and sassy, like Mama in Cape Town. And why not do things that have never been done in that market, not just follow it, not sort of follow the hype, but really create that hype and lead something that's never been done and be bold. So we're always, I think that the good question is here is like, finding the right partners really want to take that step with us and say, never journey. Done this before. Yeah. And like, kudos to those, the risk they're taking with us. But like, great, we've often done a few projects with these partners before. They like what we do. They like the F&B. They like all the brands and the experiences we create. And we say, look, we like a challenge. We're going to do something we've never done before together, working with great creatives like yourself as well and agencies. And I think that's the secret sauce, getting the right team together, that mindset to take a challenge.
Oh, and people that, as you said, like people where you are going to take that risk, it's a risk with partners that you know that everyone's going to be pulling on the same string as it were to get the same results. So yeah.
And look, we've all got skin in the game. If it doesn't sell, we look bad as well. You know, it will look bad on the agency as well. So everyone wants to make sparks fly and make those sales work. And I think, you know, it's not, we're talking a lot today about design, but it's really about innovative marketing approaches. And we've learned more and more about that in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that it's not about getting the best designers, but getting the best creative agencies, PR agencies to do something niche. And I think when we did the 25 hours High Mat in Dubai here, we did the film, like a Wes Anderson movie. And it was just, people wanted that. We're like, what's the 25 hours launch movie going to be like? Because 25 hours is so quirky and so different. And so, yeah, I think that's where it also, making sure it's not just in one design, but in all the aspects.
In all the work we do. And I think, you know, that's a major frustration for all agencies, is we're all saying like, get us on early on the project so we can all tell the story together and we can help people. I mean, that's our job, isn't it? Like, help people tell that story, you know, in a unanimous way. So everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet. So it's, the earlier we get on the projects. And I think that's what's good with you guys, is like we get on early and we all work together.
Yes.
Because there's nothing more frustrating to get somewhere and the signage is not aligned, or, you know, you've done stuff and then the product's not exactly what you've said it was. Easier with a big brand, but I think, those risks are still there. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, and I think that's really there. Like, we were just at the Mama Cape Town event, the roadshow event, and they had the model room there. The building's just behind us. It was great, but the collateral was just on point. The food was great. The music was great. Everyone was dressed. We had Mama tattoos. It just, you really felt the
all
brand,
the details, as you said,
that night. And just, why not? And I couldn't get this tattoo off for like 2 weeks or so. They told me it was 3 days. I couldn't get it off. But no, it was great. And I think people felt the vibrancy of this is something different. And it wasn't about service charges and price per square feet. It was just like, I love this brand. People came up to me telling me stories about, they knew Mama Shelter in Paris and what it did for them as a brand. And then they were looking forward to it coming to Cape Town and being very proud of that. And it was really, I love all those stories. It travels the world.
Well, as with all good podcasts, that's a great segue into our next section, which was really around culture and community and that kind of, that brand resonance, brand affiliation, brand engagement. And I think you guys, really do have that notion of being a global collective of lifestyle destinations and brands. But what do you do when you design a space or design a place or a destination to reinforce culture and community within that destination? What do you guys do?
I think a number of things. When we look at the interior design, I think it has that amazing sense of place. And I don't just mean that in kind of traditional way, but I think look at Cape Town, I think it was looking at these tribal cultures, it was looking at the national park, it has these amazing brown, dark red hues throughout the design. And then you pick up the vibrancy in the rugs and the furniture. There was these tribal shields that were inspired for the bedside lights. And then this wonderful kind of wood veneer, which was on all the kitchen fronts. So it was a very, very unique design. It was very mama, very fun, very sassy, very vibrant. But you could feel where it was from that location with a bit of a twist and a difference. And so I think that was a really good way to connect, to connect with buyers, connect with people and say, look, there is a connection here. I think one of the other ways was we were working with an existing building, wonderful, retelling a story, repurposing, in this case was a hospital building and a really important building for the city, transforming this and giving it a new story, right? Giving it a new lease of life. And there's a really nice sustainable story aspect there. I think there's a whole regeneration point. I love that whole idea of not just talking constantly about climate change, but community change. About leaving a place better than when you found it. About regenerating that whole of Bree Street, the F&B, all around the area and giving it a real magnetism from this aspect, from this building and then the residences. And part of that is it's an amazing exclusive residences, but on the ground floor, there's a great public F&B anyone can go to, as well as in a residence amenities. There happens to be one of ours. It's great with another local partner. So creating something that's bigger than the building itself, how it creates connection to that community, and also in programming, right? Mama and all that is about art and music and great house parties. And so I think how we connect with cultural calendar
of the city.
In Gold Coast, we did this great thing with the surfing community as well, how we'll do that in Cape Town, connecting there. So we've always had the aspect of lifestyle, and people often ask me, what is lifestyle? I say lifestyle is about experiences. And a lot of those experiences are around F&B, a whole social aspect of F&B, table hopping, spontaneous breakouts at a dinner or a party, wonderful, wonderful things, all those memories you created. But you create those sort of memories and experiences for people. It's a really long-lasting connection with other people and long-lasting memories and takeaways. But yeah, I would say it's through the design and unique storytelling. It's through the amazing, really experiential F&B. And I think it was through the unique programming. These are the three ways that we would create a hotel, a residences, and F&B to become the heart of the community. And we've always been very proud of that in all of the brands and all of what we do.
And I think what I really like about that story as well is the fact that, I wouldn't say that necessarily that kind of social aspect of the kind of, being in a city, being of a city, but then in that notion of giving back to the city through the cultural calendar, through the regeneration of real estate, I think is, as we're saying on the podcast, what is value? And there are multiple definitions or levers for value. And I think that's not necessarily one that we hear a lot about, but it is true. And it does really transform, as you said, old buildings, giving them new leases of life, but also giving spaces for community to express themselves and engage with the brand.
Yep.
In terms of the work that you do as well, how do you, maybe a bit more of the nitty gritty, the design, because we're often hit with but what are the metrics? How do I know that this is going to increase, financial value or rental value? How much of a pressure or a guidance are you given, or do you have to take into account when people are thinking about the monetary value of sales afterwards?
I think I know we're always been commercially minded for hotel, F&B or residential. And I think more and more, without losing sight of the line of sight of the project's success, we are bringing that developer's mindset to it. For an example, with the GFA, giving what area we'd want. There's a real balance of the Mr. Developer wants to sell off everything he can, every square meter, even including the front door. And we're saying we need some beautiful amenity spaces. That's why buying into lifestyle. Where's that sweet spot? We're not being too greedy, but finding the balance here. There's that whole, I've been called the amenity space race, where people are adding a list and list of things, and you go into and hardly any of it's used, or the screening room, the cigar lounge, some of them are a bit stifled or a bit stuck. So, we're constantly getting pressure of let's innovate. What are people really using?
And I think that's, sorry to jumping in, because how do you, because we see that across asset classes, right?
Yeah.
Even a boring building, and you'll see, amenities, and a random example, like a ping pong table, completely abandoned in the corner because someone had a great idea that someone needed a ping pong table at the office. But anyway, what is the obviously you've got the instinct, you've got the sort of the trends, you look at, dive deep into these elements around the brand and how they're expressed. But how do you validate or invalidate? How do you get to the bottom of what you feel people or know people need from data, or how does that work?
I think it really is trying to understand the buyer. And that's $1 million question in itself. It's not, we say it's a mindset, not an age group. But I make the team constantly go back to revisit the properties we've opened and see how they're being used and not being used, or cramped space. And we do this with hotels. Like I say, just because a hotel door's opened, we don't stop designing. We go back and refresh or update and
That's good.
Change some spaces and refine. These are edited spaces. They're constantly edited and edited to make them better. And so by going back, and I think we start even for the back of house spaces, did we get it right? Are these too big, these too small? Learn from the director of residence, the head concierge, the managing team, because that has to feed us back into the next project. So we know that areas we're asking for, I know that's really, really accurate of what we actually needed, and we'll cut everything back we don't need. So we're not asking too much. And then look at these spaces and say, this needs to be bigger, this needs smaller, but people want to use it in a different way. These are extensions of your home. I want to invite a guest over and we have a drink, we have a chat, but I don't necessarily want to be in an open space. I also want to do a bit more working from home, but I want to have a really cool backdrop. And so creating a space where people can use these in the way they want to use them. And so we're just constantly trying to keep in tune with what that is. And that might be in blended spaces, those spaces that can be used more multi-functional. So for example, designing as a private dining room that can be used perhaps as a boardroom, secondly. But it's not a boardroom that could be used as a private dining room, because that's a nice space to eat in. So I think thinking the flip of everything, and especially that day to night, I think we're always saying, even the renders, I need like a couple of them at nighttime, some at sunset, not just to sell it, but I just want to see how you're going to use it at nighttime, how it transfers. People put amazing pools, and then you have people coming wet back through the clubhouse. So I need 2 separate washrooms and toilets and things like this. All that logistics stuff that people can use these really the way they want to use them. So I think what I'm saying is, by constantly checking in, constantly reviewing, validating. So the next project we go to, we're very confident that what we're putting forward in a brief and innovating with these spaces is going to be relevant. It's going to be future-proofed and going to have a real meaningful and purpose to it, because I think that's the success. We're seeing a big change in, obviously, wellness. But what does that mean? Because wellness can also mean service charge. It can also mean heavily service spaces. Completely. That's a big mistake people make, of you putting all these space in the amenity, and then you wonder why the service charge has gone so incredibly high.
Through the roof,
I think we've been very nimble now of creating spaces where it's self-guided wellness, or it's this self-guided bathing, or we can bring in your guru or an IV drip or something into a space that could be used as many different ways. We don't have to have a room for every single thing.
For every single thing,
In SLS, we bring in like a glam squad and get you ready for your night out. So we can really, all these a la carte services, but it could be the same room that's just reused in different ways. And we can, being from a hotel group, we can bring the support of the local hotel and bring in a treatment and service that in that space. How to bring in the wellness component, and we're doing a big exercise to take that forward now. Just the right space of what people need in the best efficient monetary service way, without kinking the service charge. Yeah, and we've seen our hotels going from nightlife focus and celebrity now to more membership, art, and wellness space. And I think we're seeing the similar thing in branded residential. And I think art is not just on the wall, but art as a social connector.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so why not? It was the same thing we did in hotels in residential.
And that ability, again, as you said, to work with the local community, to source the local art and so on and so forth.
Yes.
To build that community.
Yeah.
Mark, you just mentioned something really interesting there about sort of design iterations. Obviously now, and I know we use it, I don't think I feel guilty about it, but in terms of AI, is that something that you have helped to visualize space in a faster, swifter way than you could have done before?
Not necessarily. I think we're doing more traditional design, I would say stage work.
And steps,
but look, sometimes we've tested it to really explore something. We have used it in a way just to see what this could look like in a resort or a desert or something like that. So really to feel for it. I think the AI often gives you 30 solutions, and it takes a human to ring out the 28 that are rubbish and the 2 that are solid. And that can take time as well. So what's really nice is where a designer, and we work with really good creatives, is where they've, instead of taking an image and say, oh, it could look like this in that space, they've really used AI to draw that, this amazing Mondrian chandelier in this space and quickly just show me that look like. That's been really useful, even for an owner, for ourselves, to take the brand DNA of some of our really eccentric brands with strong personality and what that could look like in a chrome inflatable bedside pillow or an amazing chandelier. Because that can really be all you need to have a design cue of the brand. At the end of the day here, these are fitted, not furnished. And so the furnishings we're showing are, aspirational, we sell furniture packs, etc. But we've got to give that personality to the brand. And I think it's a good question to talk about how much of the brand we put in and where do we put it in, because
what's the dosage?
Yeah, in a hotel, right? You can be stimulated in a really nice sensory way, and you're staying like 1.4 nights for urban hotel, something like 2 or 3 nights for a resort or something. It's a nice level. But to live there now 2 or 3 years is a little bit too much for an SLS, which is really intricate, over the top. And so we tend to like dial it back to 80% the public areas, and you can feel the essence of the brand, and then pull it back 40, 50% in the residences, because people have their own furniture, their own personality, and that might come through in bathrooms and kitchens. And we always say bathrooms and kitchens sell units, right? So if I can feel, but it's got a good brand, it's got, Gaggenau, it's got the bowl top, it's got the Miele, it's got all those things that you'd recognize of that level of luxury. And then it's got some of the Mondrian or SLS or Delano signatures through in terms of the design. And the same in the bathroom, it might be a tap or something like this. That's enough, right? You've got
accessorized without being
accessories, but some feeling. If Mondrian has a bit more, into even the way materiality we come through. Delano is more like raw and honest. You want to feel it. It's crafted. It's textured. Mondrian is more progressive materiality. You'd think it's more resin. You'd think it's more future forward materiality. Straight away, I'm talking about 2 different brands in materiality, and I think you feel these straight away. Not just and of course then we would style it and go through there. So yeah, that's a really nice way of talking about how it really comes through to the crafting and the materiality as well. But back to AI, I think it's a great tool, but it still needs that human aspect to it, I think, for sure.
I think on the input and the output, as you were saying, measurement.
Yeah.
In terms of sort of long-term value, creating that community, that culture around a brand, how important is, and how do you guys collect also like residents' feedback about how, as you said, how they're utilizing the space, but also how they're becoming ambassadors really for that space in both, a positive way, but also being part of then, I don't know, broader creative community? Because every feedback will help or not help, but like tweak and twiddle what you're doing for the next one.
Yeah, and I think the word you mentioned there is really community. And I think when developers buzz us about short-term rentals, it's always that you're going to miss that whole community if you don't get people. And the idea is that this might be their primary home, but they may have 4 primary homes nowadays. Okay, and that's fine. They may have, Madrid and Dubai and Singapore or something like this. And so what if I can move throughout these SLS clubhouse spaces, and when I'm in town, that's my home, that's the place I work from as a network of these clubhouses. But the spirit of that community of like-minded individuals that buy into our brands, buy into lifestyle, I think they're coming from this aspect that they want access to something cool. There's people that want ultra luxury, people that want the brands, people that want this access to something cool, be it the wellness, the lifestyle, the F&B that we can offer. And there's this trick that some of the director of residencies always tell me is they always, apart from collecting service charge, the only way sometimes they meet and chat with the residencies is the whole post idea, right? Giving post and things like that. And that's a great way for them. They deliberately sometimes hold it a bit because they want to meet and have that conversation and how is it going and understand. And I remember talking to the guys at OWO is that making the drivers their best friend, because of the drivers, we create drivers waiting rooms now because it's about getting those off the floor, off the road, and looking after the drivers. They're your best friend, and then it all works up to the residences. So I think it's coming at it from all angles. It's the residents, their staff, the way they operate, and the people that are the visitors that are going to come to them. I think it's all now we're creating kind of visitors lounges in lobbies, because it might be the broker, it might be the florist, not parcels and deliveries and dry cleaners, but it might be their team and staff. They don't want to come up to their residents. They're not necessarily coming up to the clubhouse, but it's like a lounge area they can be received in the entrance area. And so I think it's thinking of the laterals of beyond that as well. But we've just at the Seoul Uptown Residences, they do a monthly event in the property for the residents as well, and I think that's great. Getting to know them, showing them.
They've got a great cinema room, haven't they?
That's right,
and other things. Yeah,
they do that, but they try and move it around the building. Might be in the residence part. They're mixed use, also in the hotel, to show the residents new parts of the hotel they're not using, activating, get them to know them, for them to know each other, and so really good, nice levers to get that community talking, and obviously then with the apps. And I think the way a lot of them either call up and ask for service, or they use the apps to dial that, keeping that personalized service. There's one thing we haven't talked about, is not just AI in digital, in design, but also AI in service. There's so much inquiries about, do you want AI to take over your phone systems? And I think for me, that's a hard no. It's because that gives us the opportunity. Great, well, I've got you on the phone. How is this? How is that?
We've all had the calls like, after this call, you'll be asked to fill a survey. You're like, nope, no way.
But if I've got you on, I'm a human operator, and I've got you on the phone, and while you're ordering this, and we can just ask you, how is this? And
completely.
The dog and whatever it is. So I think it's the best way to take care of the residences and create the communities, I think, looking around all the spheres they work in.
And this notion of community then, if we take it also to kind of like a sales, sort of the sales journey or the customer journey, how do people classically become a member or want to become a member of this community and then purchase into that community? What stories have you heard? Like, where does it start in essence? When does that relationship, maybe it is visiting one of your friends that lives in, or maybe it is going to one of the hotels, or sometimes it could be just seeing one of the posters or seeing one of the adverts and go like, oh, that's pretty cool. What are the classic sort of journeys that you've heard of?
I think for us, we have a lucky advantage of the hotels being a really early brand touch point, and I remember how it made me feel when I was there in Mama Paris West or something like this, and or I used to stay there. So those early memories, really lasting memories, stay with people. And then when the brand comes to town, or that's a really early access for us. I think also with the F&B as well. Yes, visiting other people in other residences is always good. We have people that visited some and were really impressed by the amenities, but just obviously the design and the overall balance of the programming. But I think, back to, I think it's the early access through our brands. And like I said, it's always surprising us, like I said, with Mondrian, with Mama, the stories of how people have come across the brands.
Exactly.
And we're telling those stories and retelling those stories, and it's wonderful. And I think we have Delano coming, and Delano Miami reopening next year. This is a story that spans sort of 30 years, and we're retelling that story. Amazing icon that has evolved, and people remember how it first made them feel walking into the Delano lobby. And what we're going to do now. And then if we bring a resident to London or to Dubai or something, they'll really want to see how that translates into residential.
I think it's a really good, you could do that across the spectrum of looking at all the brands and all the things that you purchase, of recurring purchases around brands, and try and think about, when was your first time with that newspaper, or with that magazine, or with those trainers, and then into destinations. So I think it's, that kind of historical DNA of where did it start is really interesting.
And I guess, good or bad, that goes through to the product brand as well. It goes through to the watch, the cars. I think it's that same, it's an emotional thing. And I think we at the office are constantly saying, how does it make you feel? And really, how is that emotional connection? What are these experiences we're creating? There's so much aesthetical bombardment in the world right now with design and everything. It's nice just to sidestep that and talk about it as a feeling and an emotional connection. Like I said, like walking into the Delano lobby, how it really made you feel.
Do you have, and I know this is probably not a word that exists, but do you have community hoppers? So people who might be on multiple brands, or people who feel that, let's say, they've engaged with the brand. And again, but this is about my midlife crisis, I don't know. But they've engaged with a brand when they were young, and they love the feeling, but they feel, oh, that's not really for me anymore, so I'll hop on to another one. Do you have those?
Yeah, there's like a graduation. I think you.
It's nicer than community hopper.
And I think people, come in, love us as mama, and end up leaving as a Faina or a Delano. It's like they grows with them, and they go, oh, now I'm in luxury lifestyle. I can't go back, and I need those finer things. But I think it moves with them. But there's also the silverhead nomad that still loves, it being in a mama lobby and lying on the back, taking a picture of themselves in the mirror, and it resonates with all things. So I wouldn't say it's an age necessary thing, but just, I think that's really nice. I have heard people that have started in one brand and moved through, but also it's a bit, horses for courses in that word. In the urban environment, people might like Mondrian, and they feel because it connects them, and just those chance misencounters of the right people and the connection with art world. But in a resort, maybe in a different location, they're feeling more, or their other home might be, for Delano. So I think it's how it plays. I think for the overall is the philosophy and mindset that as Ennismore and as lifestyle, it's that same philosophy brought throughout. Mama Shelter used to explain itself as a restaurant with rooms on top. And I think that just really nicely explains, and that could be said about a few brands, but the experiences around the F&B, the social scene, the being at the heart of the community. And it's not just about, a place to put your head and on the pillow, etc. And I think the same thing with the residences. So you're keep pushing the brands, keep innovating, evolving them, and keeping, refreshed and relevant is really key for us, is what we want to keep doing.
And in terms of some of the global projects you have, do you have like one or two you could quickly talk us through the process of where you started and how that sort of developed into a thriving destination in terms of the various steps you guys go through from inception, design, delivery, and then viewing how it then works and tweaking along the way? Do you have one that comes to mind?
Look, I think, and we're doing some great projects in London now. For me, that's nice to be going back home there. But I think working, for me, always in Europe, you're renovating, doing shiny new buildings like you are in the Middle East here. You're doing renovating, you're retelling a story, working with historical buildings. But you're then tapping into a neighborhood. You've really got to understand the neighborhood. I always believe that when we send the team to really go and understand, sometimes it's about eating in restaurants because F&B moves faster than hotels and residences sometimes. So I think they love it because the F&B bill comes back. But on these recce trips, I think it's about going and understand the neighborhood, and understand the pulse of the city, the wellness aspects, some competitors, and then going to go, well, what's our move? What's our play? Where are we going to sit with this? We can't do everything, and we're going to do it through the lens of Ennismore. We're going to do a cool lifestyle component to it. And let's just do 2 or 3 things and do it really well and access it. So, a lot of the things we've done in London is creating these small neighborhood focused properties that are exactly that. They're as good for travelers, for residents, for buyers as they are local community. And, not just putting in a restaurant that you're going to go once a month or for a business dinner or a birthday, but you're going to go 2 or 3 times a week. You're going to go with business, with your spouse, but also back at the weekend with family. And I think those are the nice things. When we get it right, the sweet spot, I think, and a little bit of that secret sauce is because we've understood what we're not and how it's going to work with the neighborhood.
If you were to compare, obviously, incomparable markets, but you mentioned Europe, a lot of work in the Middle East as well, which, as you said, is, thriving, hyper dynamic, sky's the limit kind of thing. How would you view those two differences in terms of the audience or the local perception of what's been done? Do you think they're more conservative? It's harder? How would you view the differences between those two markets, really?
I think there's a call for a lot more integrity in perhaps more mature markets, would we say. I think big, shiny new things was something that the Middle East was known for, right? With projects with no budget. And that's changing. I think now people are looking for more layers, more reason to be. People are questioning with budgets. And I think that's good. Finally, we're getting to that stage now where there's a bit of common sense to it. And what is it going to give back in terms of community for not just who can afford it, but really who's going to live here and create this legacy community. So it's really nice to see that maturing in layers and integrity as we would in London or Miami. If you look in Miami, the competition is so thorough, it's so impressive. And I think, you make one move wrong and it's in the project that won't move. And there's more forgiving perhaps in other markets. So you really can spin on a sixpence and get it wrong. And I think maybe making a unit too big, and straight away the ticket price of that unit has just made it miss the market. I think it is about being nimble, about changing for different markets. But I think back to your question, I think it's, you're going into every market very differently. That's why we need great local partners, great, sales advisors, people that understand it, working with a developer who understands the market and wants to do something different, but for the right reasons.
And if there were any myths that you had to dispel about the work you do and the residential side of, what you do, what would it be?
Well, I think the first one I said was it's fitted but not furnished. I still like this one. I think this. I always say turn it upside down. Everything that falls out, the show flat versus what you're actually buying. Look, I think that it does take a lot to operate these as a back of house. They're really what makes these work, and unfortunately, that eats up nice precious GFA, which they'd want to sell. So if you really want us to do what we do well and service this, and that's why I'm buying this, I want to get my amazing pizza from the restaurant, from an award-winning restaurant, delivered straight up to my residences, or I want housekeeping service, or if I want flowers changed, or I want a private supper, a chef to come in. We're going to need all that stuff to make all that work. And that, unfortunately, that eats up part of the percentage of the GFA. The developers, for me, that's the biggest conception, that they can sell everything off apart from a lobby, and that's the only amenity space. I think it takes up...
You need your engine room, basically.
You need your engine room, exactly, to make it all work. But it's worth it at the end of the day, because that's what really makes the difference. And look, I think the other misconception is that we sold, we're done, we walk away. We don't. We then hand it on to our operations team, who then go, thanks in a good way, you've got it all right, or if we're not, we're in trouble, because we that's what we're here for. We have got skin in the game. We're a long-term partner. We then operate this. We're not just selling and walking away. We then operate this under the brand for many years to come. So really, getting it really right is really important, just like we would for a hotel. It's a long-term game for us, long-term partners, because at the end of the day, it's our brand that's at stake as well. Yeah.
And in terms of the future, closing off, how do you see what innovations, trends, changes in the product you design, but also how people engage with them? What's the horizon looking like?
Look, I think we'll park smart homes and technology. I think that's going the right way, but very invisible, very intuitive. We like all that. I think the product of residential becoming living, I think that's interesting with branded offices as well. I think it's really interesting, especially with our brands going into that. I think we're going to see much more of the mixed use with hotel and resi, because it's a fantastic cash flow, right? You sell the resi, it pays for the hotel. But I think it also really helps us in terms of the service and efficiency of all this. So we keep going with the mixed use. I think is going to see a lot more of that in the future, but we're going to be pushing it more into more the living aspect and what that means. And we've got some exciting new innovation in that, taking more brands into it that we wouldn't have normally done, right? I think that's really cool, that people really want more and more of the lifestyle brands. And look, I think we picked up on some trends before, and now we're going to drive some trends going forward. I think they're having guest house suites, I think, is now the common, but a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have known what these are. And I think, we have it with a hotel. It's great. You can put family and extended family in the hotel. So that kind of answers that question. But just, I think, going back to really basics, understanding how people want to live in these spaces now, how they want the type of service is going to really unlock innovation in the branded resi sector.
Yeah. And I think also, as you said, it's where do you utilize and magnify tech, but also I think it's also getting back, you said about the concierge, going back to basics on some things and saying these are 100% and must remain 100% human to create that community.
But using tech in a great way, like so that when I come back from a trip, the pipes have been flushed, the temperature is set, the light bulb, when the light bulb's about to go out. So that's all really good. Even if I have to pay a service charge to have your maintenance team repair it all, that's great. But let's use tech in the right way, not to take the hospitality aspect of it that we're known for, but use it in a way that's going to make, solve problems, firefight before we know it, troubleshoot, and make everything a bit more seamless, easier in that aspect. That's where we want to use it. Yeah.
Because how do you say welcome home?
Exactly.
Which are the different things?
Very nice, yeah.
Mark, this has been An amazing chat, amazing journey to go through everything.
Yeah.
I can just say thanks ever so much.
Thank you. Yeah, it's gone by so fast. It's been a really nice chat and I've enjoyed it.
I really appreciate it. Mark,
Thank you.
thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks for listening to Bricks and More. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a colleague or friend who would appreciate it. If you're not already, connect with me on LinkedIn, whether to say hello or discuss a destination, real estate, or hospitality project of your own. Finally, please rate the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, share the episode, connect with me on LinkedIn, and rate the podcast. I'm Adrian Strittmatter, and I'll be back soon with the next episode.